How's that? Does it work? Does that work any better?
Yeah, one more step.
Okay, now I'm nice and close. And the one thing you don't want is for me to sing a song. I've always told people that, you know, if we get a second chance to come around, I'll come back as a singer because I can't sing at the note. But anyway, I like to listen to others sing like we've been able to this evening. But this is a great event. Enjoyed our visit today and meeting a lot of people. You know, I kid a lot. And you probably have heard this before. But I get applause when I come to organizations and events like this. Can't hear me. Okay, how's that? Hey! No, I always comment when I hear applause is that it sounds nice, sounds like friends, but it never occurred in Washington. I never had any applause. But so it is nice to be among friends. I've always advocated, as I campaign throughout the country quite a few years, was that when you get together, you have to have fun because the problems we face are rather serious. And although we believe we have answers, we have to be realistic and they're not going to occur tomorrow. But in the meantime, since we don't know exactly what tomorrow will bring, that we should have a good time. And that's the one thing is when people come together and they have a basic agreement on fundamentals and yet not have basic agreement on every single issue, socially and morally and religious and all, you can still come together. That's why I've always argued the case that liberty brings people together. And I think that's a big message. Because liberty is based on tolerance of other people. And as long as they take the pledge that they're not going to commit aggression against anybody, you know, this is very good because everybody, you know, supports the cause of liberty. And that should bring, if people understand this should bring conservatives, liberals, libertarians, everybody together as long as they're not forcing their views on somebody else, and as long as we don't have a government trying to do it to us. So this is why I think that freedom is popular. You know, I did a lot of work in Washington over the years on the Federal Reserve, and I talked about that a little bit today. But I think there's about 7 Federal Reserve Board chairmen. I was in Washington while they were chairman. Actually, the first one was Arthur Burns. And the neat thing about him and Paul Volcker was one was allowed to smoke a pipe and the other a cigar. And I think smoking's bad. I don't smoke. I don't want to smell it. But let me tell you, I sort of thought that was a different era. People didn't get hysterical because somebody had a pipe and they were smoking. So that to me is sort of a mixed bag for me. I don't like the idea of smoking, but right now there's a little bit of hysteria. But Arthur Burns was the guy that revealed what was really going on. And a reporter asked him once, because he was close buddy with Nixon, and all presidents want to tell the Federal Reserve Board chairman about interest rates. No matter what they say in campaign, once they're president, they want to have low interest rates because it's good for the economy, they think. But what do you do to get lower interest rates when they're zero? So that's a challenge. But anyway, there was a reporter, I believe the reporter was from Germany, and asked Arthur Burns, does this mean that you have to do the president's bidding? He says, yes, we have to do the president's bidding or we will lose our independence. So as long as you do what the president says, they will be independent, because that's what they claim, that they are independent and they're not influenced by political problems and political people. But the thing of it is, they never talk much about being influenced by the deep state. Now that's a group that really influenced the Federal Reserve. But you know, in 1979, a few of you would remember that rather well. It was the end of the decade after Bretton Woods broke down. And it was the market that crashed Bretton Woods. They were trying to pretend that gold was convertible at $35 an ounce, which wasn't true because we were printing money like crazy, and the market said it's worth a lot more. So it broke down, and then gold took off from $35 an ounce, and then it overshot. It was way under, then it overshot, and by the end of the decade in '79, it was at a few days it was over $800. And Volcker was one of the chairmen that I got along with a little bit better, and I thought he was a little more dignified. And I was having a little debate with him in the committee about a monetary issue, and he afterwards he says, "Why don't you come over and have breakfast, and I'll go over this with you. You know, that is to convert me to this voting for this particular bill." So I went over, and I had one staff person with him, and this was a private breakfast. And then also Volker's staffer was there. So when we walked in, my staffer and myself, and Volker's staffer was there, and we were talking. And I remember very clearly because it was an exciting time, because it's when the dollar was very rocky and gold was up to $800. So Volker walks in the room, and I thought he'd come over and say, good morning, Congressman Paul, or something. No, he went to his staff person. He says, "What was the price of gold?" So they watched the price of gold too. It's very important because gold does reflect the value of a currency. It's been that way for a long time, and I suspect it will remain very, very important. But one time I was riding on a helicopter with Ronald Reagan, and there were certain circumstances that just he and I were on the helicopter. We were flying out to Andrews Air Force Base, and he knew I came from the Gold Commission report, and he was basically a gold standard person, but it was just not time for it. But in that short conversation, he says, he says, any great country that has ever gone off the gold standard never remained great. And there's some truth to that, because the real truth is when you get rid of all your restraint, then you print like crazy and you cause the chaos that we have. So that has been the case. Now, there was one interesting episode with Alan Greenspan. Some of you, if you've read anything about Ayn Rand, she had her Objectivist newsletter, and Greenspan had an article, Gold and Freedom, and it was a great article, fantastic, about why you had to have restraints, and it would create massive deficits. It's highly critical of the Federal Reserve and big government. And this was a well-known article, but he had totally forgotten about it by the time he got to Washington and became the chairman. But there was an incident before we were supposed to go into committee, and we were able to go in and say hello and socialize and get a picture with him. So I did that, and we were sitting in a chair. They were getting our picture, but I had brought along with me the original copy of the Objectivist newsletter from 1966, and it was the original copy. So I pulled that out and I said, "Mr. Greenspan, do you recognize this letter?" He said, "Oh yeah, I know that letter very well." He wasn't going to deny it. So I opened it up and I said, "Do you remember this article?" He says, "Yeah, I just read that the other night, and I endorse everything I read." And I thought, wow. But I said, "How about signing it for me?" So he got his pen out and he signs that. So I have a signed copy of the original thing about this article that has had a lot of comments. So after he finished signing it, I asked him, "Do you want to put a disclaimer on it now?" Because he had lost his way. But the other little incident that occurred dealing with monetary issues was when not too long ago Greenspan was in there, and I was always bringing up monetary questions. So one time I just asked him a question. I said, "Mr. Chairman, is gold money?" And he paused, waited and waited. It seemed like a long time, but 15 or 20 seconds would be long. So finally he said, "No." And I said, "Well, why is it that you and other central banks hold gold if it's not money?" And he says, I said, why don't you, he said, "It's just tradition." I said, "Well, why don't you hold diamonds or something else? They're valuable." But he said, just tradition. But the truth is they still because of the nature of gold in history, it's still pretty important. No matter what is divided electronically and through cryptocurrencies or whatever, I don't think you'll ever eliminate the measurement of currencies. I think currencies are important, most important because it's a measurement of value. That's probably the most important thing for exchange. And I think that has to happen because it's not like we have an ounce of gold in a gold standard for every transaction, but you can price things in an ounce of gold, and it's a measuring. It's like having a ruler. And I keep thinking that the kind of system we have today, one of the reasons we have chaos trying to run an economy which isn't running so well, is the fact that it would be like the architect and the builder to build a building with the yardstick changing its value every single day. It becomes chaotic. So this is the reason I'm looking for sound money, and if it's modern, it's crypto. The market will determine that. I think that my goal and my responsibility from my viewpoint is to make sure that the free choice is out there, and this is the reason I introduced legislation every year for competing currencies. Let the market decide. Let the people decide. Money has known to be always established in the marketplaces. Then the government takes it over. So what we're talking about and what we're in the middle of right now is the return of the monetary issue for the people to decide in a voluntary manner what money should be. Thank you very much.